This video is a film study look at what the Minnesota Vikings defense was able to do, specifically what they were trying to possibly accomplish in shutting down the Detroit Lions run game and then attacking their pass pro schemes to the tune of sacking Jared Goff 5 times and multiple quarterback hits. It's an interesting strategy that the Vikings utilized. I will be honest with you, watching it live and then trying to encapsulate it for the reaction video yesterday afternoon, it looked like there was this wide umbrella of possible blitzes that Brian Flores was depending on. After watching the film one time through this afternoon, that is actually not the case. There are less sophisticated blitzes than you may imagine, and I intend to show you during the course of this video. I'm only going to focus here on the offensive shutdown that occurred in the first half when the Lions had to punt on 5 of their first 7 possessions. We'll get the film started here on the first possession. This is, of course, going to be obviously a big positive. The first possession, Sam Laporta was in control. We had 3 catches, one of which was a screen into the boundary. I felt like Detroit was using this running back motion to try to elicit something from the Vikings. Basically, we're lining up Gibbs to the right-hand side of Goff, to the top side of our screen, motioning him out for a moment. And then once he returned, he would go to the other side. So I think they're trying to find out a couple of things. Is anyone going to move on this motion by Gibbs? And you see it repeatedly, trying to sift out what the Vikings might in fact be doing. 8 guys lined up here in the box. Oftentimes they were bailing these safeties at a differential timing or staggering their release. In any case, this is a touchdown to Laporta over the top. Really, essentially, we've got a cover 2. So I think Metellus 44 should be more so like fronting up Laporta and possibly running underneath of him if this is a Tampa, and Brian Flores does really like Tampa 2 stuff. But in any case, he's lined up over Laporta to make it look like it's man, and then they shift to a zone, the cover 2, and Goff, I think, has got a great idea of how to get rid of this, and I think this, unfortunately, might have dissuaded Flores from some of the stuff he did later on. Essentially, I wonder if this made him say, okay, we're just going to turn the volume up on 3rd and 4th downs and put as much pressure on Goff and the offensive line and the running backs, obviously, as we can. 40-yard touchdown on the first possession that really makes a statement and makes it look like, I mean, whoa, you're just going to continue the same path where Goff has been executing against the Vikings defense for a couple of years. Moving into the second possession, generally I'm going to avoid run plays in this video. I will show one, I believe, down on the goal line that the Vikings are able to absolutely annihilate. So this is second possession, 2nd and 8. We're tied at 7, and it's a jet dive, or a jet dive look, I should say. So the jet action is by Gibbs, who's in the game at the same time as Montgomery. The dive or the zone is possibly opposite of it. So you end up really with a screen to the top side. I mean, Eric Wilson played a phenomenal game. I wonder if maybe the wide receiver should step to him first, and then that would allow Sewell to possibly get up to him. This is a great play. He sees it. He's got eyes on Goff, obviously. Comes downhill, makes the tackle. They were swarming. It just seems like some of the screens that are run with Gibbs so far this year appear to be, maybe a little bit slower developing. I'm not sure, but they've been shut down consistently. This defensive tackle also sees it clearly, sees that Goff did not hand the football off. Inside-out pursuit, really not anywhere to go for Gibbs once that force player, Eric Wilson, the inside linebacker, is able to attack and essentially beat Sewell to his teammate, trying to block for his teammate. Creates a 3rd and long on this possession, 3rd and 15 to be specific, I believe, after a Detroit penalty. This is going to be a great play by Isaiah Rodgers, who's having an unbelievable 2025 so far. Also, disciplined play by the outside linebacker here. I think it's 58, Grenard. Basically, he's going to get upfield briefly and then recognize the screen. I mean, he sees it right in front of him. So I do wonder if maybe Jameson Williams is supposed to catch this ball and go at this angle. So essentially a tunnel screen, if you will, whereby the offensive linemen are getting out in front to block, and then J-Mo is supposed to take it underneath of that. He kind of catches it twice. And so as a result of catching it twice, he can't go on that path, number 1. Number 2, Isaiah Rodgers is really already there, so I think he's going to have an opportunity, Isaiah Rodgers, to tackle Jameson Williams, even if he does catch it cleanly and go on that pre-described path that I showed you. I mean, let's be honest, you're not going to succeed on 3rd and 15 consistently against pretty much any defense, but especially not one that's coordinated by Brian Flores that tries to obfuscate and hide so many of their stunts. So here's something they did repeatedly over the course of the day. So when Pace was on the field, they would line him up outside, and I think that's to elicit a protection scheme from the top side, stepping to his side. So you've got a defensive tackle, Pace, and then I think that's Wilson, the hybrid inside linebacker. That's not Wilson, my apologies. Wilson's down there. I'm not sure which of the OLBs that is, but you get the point. You got a defensive tackle and then 2 linebackers to that side. Then what they do is they'll walk him back in and blitz him through an inside gap. I'll come back down and talk about St. Brown's route and what the Vikings appear to be doing, very similar to some stuff that we saw from the Chiefs and the Bucs. Gibbs is really in a no-win situation. He takes over Pace, who again originated from over in this area, walked back, and then blitzed on the opposite side of the center. And Gibbs takes him over. Cashman on the second man through is able to get free, really become the initial pressure on Goff, leading to the sack. But something to mention or talk about is these teams that are focusing on St. Brown so much. I think that you've really got to examine, as a Detroit Lions offensive staff member, whether it's Morton, Dan Campbell as well, how much teams are doing things specific to where St. Brown is. So they're dropping the OLB out, which the Vikings did repeatedly yesterday. I mean, that's when I talked about in the lead-in that these stunts are not nearly as complicated as they looked live. This is what I'm talking about. Essentially, repeatedly, you have inside linebackers blitzing, outside linebackers dropping out. And then occasionally, the outside linebackers will blitz, and the inside linebackers will fake the blitz, and they'll drop out. That's really about as complicated as it got at times. So it's interesting to me that Detroit had so much trouble with it. But you got this safety, Metellus, hybrid safety, nickel, inside linebacker, whatever. Looking to St. Brown's side, number 1. Number 2, Wilson, 55, dropping out from his edge defender position. And I think that's where Goff, wanted to go with the football initially. So many times Goff's first read, his first look, is to St. Brown's side, and I think I've mentioned that a couple of times. I believe that there must be some real tendencies there in certain situations. A brilliant strategy, if you ask me, that Minnesota deployed. So same play from the end zone angle. Here is Pace. It's actually Grenard over there. I misidentified him earlier. So he's going to step back and then blitz in the opposite side A-gap. In addition to that, Cashman is going to go through the near side A-gap, or the one that's on our left. I think what they've done is they've forced these offensive linemen to deal with this 3 technique, the possibility of Pace blitzing on that side, and Grenard. So essentially cut this in half for a moment, if you can mentally, and the center and Gibbs have now got to deal with the nose tackle, Pace, and Cashman. But it's still only a 5-man stunt. So really, you've got a 3-on-2 in here, and the Lions have allocated 2 blockers for the defensive tackles because of the pass pro scheme that they're running. We can blame John Morton for a lot of things, or we can question some of the things he's doing, right? Play calling, design, maybe it's somewhat basic, predictable, sure. This is only O-line coach and the whole operation, in that this stunt worked so often and they weren't able to find a fix during the game. It basically makes me wonder what kind of intel or data is out there for this offense versus Gibbs or Montgomery on the field. It's one of the reasons why I would like to see Gibbs and Montgomery being shuttled in and out at times on the same possession, as opposed to just a blanket rotating possessions. Hopefully I said that in a way that makes sense. Same possession. We've now got it to a 3rd and 9 with the ball on the top side hash. Of course, the Minnesota Vikings are in this mug look where they've got a whole bunch of guys lined up on the line of scrimmage. Rotate one of them out quickly, and the Lions switch sides with Gibbs. And then there's this differential or this staggered release. One safety went early, and the other one went late. And when I say he went late, he went about a second before the ball is snapped. Maybe even a little bit less. I think that was intentional. I think that was designed to get Goff to see something late that he's not going to be able to make a check to the offensive line with. In addition, you've got another target to St. Brown. It's trail man by the Vikings. So basically, he's running an under. This safety is a too high safety. This is Smith, who bailed out late. He's a too high safety. Look at the orientation of all of these DBs. They're underneath. They're behind. They're not beat. They're trailing. It's trail man. So they're trying to take away like an in cut or an out cut. They're trying to play underneath of this stuff. In this case, St. Brown, is so good. Goff, maybe Goff could have put this throw further in that direction to let St. Brown run onto it. But it's one of the things I want to talk about when I get the end zone angle is Goff doesn't know what's from here on up. Why? Because as soon as the ball snapped, he immediately looked at St. Brown. It's not a bad thing. St. Brown's a Hall of Fame level football player eventually, once he stacks another 5 or 6 seasons on like this one. But I wonder, I speculate, since he didn't look to the other side of the field at all, he doesn't have any idea what the coverage is doing over there. In any case, they motion Raymond across, and a DB goes with him, so Goff thinks or pretty much knows, he's got man. 2 inside linebackers. Well, one of them is Metellus, who's a hybrid player. But watch this guy release early, and then late is Smith to a half-field safety on the left, and then Metellus is basically going to switch over and play man on Laporta really, really late. So they're doing as much as they can to hide things from Goff. Pre-snap to post-snap, we're talking about Metellus moving over late to take Laporta as first safety moves out. Second guy is late, turning, and they can do this because it's man underneath, and it's specifically trail man. So they've tagged this late release, or I should say bundled it, this late release by the safety, with a trail man technique that would basically force Goff or influence Goff to throw things over the top. In addition, it looks like it could be a 5-man rush at first. Cashman is occupying the center, but all that is just obfuscation as well. He really has Gibbs in man. You're talking about what looks something crazy pre-snap on a 3rd and 9, ends up being just a traditional 4-man rush. All the things that Goff had to process because they were unable to get the running game going, you had to process situations like that more times, maybe 12, 14, 16, 18 times. Whereas if you're able to get the run game going or complete passes on 1st and 10, then Goff is put in less of those situations to be exposed, along with the offensive line and the running backs. It still ends up being a tough throw. Maybe Goff could have put it for a little bit further out in front. How often do you see trail man? It's not a ton. I mean, it's a coverage that it was utilized a lot by the Tampa Bay Bucks in their huge win over the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl years back, Tom Brady's final year. So it was a big conversion on the 3rd possession because you didn't allow them to get the ball back for the Vikings offense. Recall they had scored their first 2 possessions to take a 14-7 lead. Still on the 3rd possession for the Lions, it's a 2nd and 6. I think he had a 4-yard run on 1st and 10. This is going to be incomplete to Laporta. You got Pace as an inside linebacker, basically the same outside alignment early pre-snap to possibly get everyone to step to this side or some kind of call to get force the pass pro to allocate for him or get to step to that side. You do have a pass release generally by the 2 tight ends. It's 12 personnel. Morton went with 12 personnel a lot. And really, this is going to create a one-on-one between Pace and Gibbs. I feel like the Vikings rotated their inside linebackers. I'm not saying that it was for this reason and this reason only, but Gibbs was put in these pass pro situations a ton, whereas sometimes it was Cashman, sometimes it was Pace, as you see here, and sometimes it was Eric Wilson. Essentially think like a fighter training for a big fight where they use one sparring partner for each round, but the fighter is responsible for each particular round. Hopefully I said that in a way that makes sense. The idea is force Gibbs to work harder. In addition to that, you got both OLBs dropping out, Wilson to the top and Grenard. It almost functions like a double team down here at the bottom side of the screen. I'm talking about Grenard tangling with Brock Wright. Certainly you're not going to double team Brock Wright, but you get the idea of the inside linebackers blitzing consistently, and in fact, it's kind of an add-on. Cashman is blitzing late, so he is the 2nd inside linebacker, and here is the 2nd OLB. So once again, you got another situation where both inside linebackers end up crossing the line of scrimmage, essentially a blitz, and both OLBs drop out. Goff is forced to throw it under pressure, and he ends up on the ground. I don't know what the tendency is. I don't know if it's shotgun stuff related to under center, because we're seeing this blitz against under center here and shotgun at other times. I don't know if it's Gibbs. I have no idea what Minnesota knew, in my opinion. They knew something about run-pass tendencies because they were in the correct call so often. These are the 2 OLBs that are going to drop out. Pace going to step back in. I've edited the video myself, so I run out of it, but you'll just have to trust me. He was lined up over here for a moment. Well, I guess you saw it from the All-22 a moment ago. So he's going to end up in a one-on-one with Gibbs. They forced the center, Glasgow, to step to the nose tackle right here. And then Mahogany stepped to the defensive tackle, clearing this lane for Pace versus Gibbs. I don't know. I'm not going to say you're going to see this every week because everyone doesn't call defenses the same way that Brian Flores does. In addition, Cashman is really late here. So this is unique. It's not that you never see these things happen at all, but in this game at least, when Minnesota was blitzing both inside linebackers, it was declared. You saw it. You saw it happen. Cashman appears to either be reading this or maybe he forgot. And so I don't know which one it is, but he's late, basically an add-on blitzer, so it ends up looking like a little bit more guys blitzing than perhaps it actually is. But you have this total disruption of the offense with well-timed blitzes up the middle. Clearly that was intentional as part of the game plan. The very next snap, it's a 2nd and 6 after the incompletion. And now you get Cashman, and now Wilson is on inside linebacker. You can see Pace is off. They're going to blitz. And you guessed it, both outside linebackers are going to drop out. You see this one over and over and over again in this game. In this case, they're stunting around Glasgow, and I will give you the end zone angle so you can see it. So Gibbs steps up to meet the first inside linebacker. And then Wilson loops over the top, attacks Glasgow, and he ends up getting the first touch on Goff. So you've got the 2nd and 3rd possessions. After the game-opening touchdown, the one that I showed you, the 40-yarder to Laporta, you got 9 plays for 7 yards and 2 punts. Same play from the end zone angle again. This is 3rd and 6 on the 3rd possession. So both LLBs, Van Ginkel, I think Van Ginkel being there was a huge development. That guy, I feel like even though he didn't make a ton of tackles, has so much versatility that it allowed them the freedom to do this. Too easy of a win, if you ask me here. You've got a one-on-one basically between Wilson and Glasgow. This is too easy of a win for him, in my opinion. You've got to be better at least getting a piece of Wilson. Even if you're losing, just keep fighting and trying to ride him out of there. But this is a clean win for Wilson, runs right through. That, to me, is just too easy to execute against this offensive line that has a lot of talent and a lot of history of putting Goff and the run game in better positions than we saw them provide on Sunday afternoon. The Lions got a short field here for their 4th possession. The defense got a stop, and then I think Raymond had like a 7 or 8 yard return. So they needed 9 plays, however, to go 35 yards. I'm giving you the second set of downs. It's a 2nd and 8 here after a short run. Both inside linebackers are going to threaten blitzes, or at least one of them up to the top side, but they don't actually blitz. They drop out. And the Vikings run a stunt to the top side. So we're talking about what's happening right here. Grenard, clean run through. Why did that happen? I think the defensive tackle is holding Mahogany for a moment. I'm not saying that I think that should be called every single time, but it looks to me like you've got a hold here by that defensive tackle on Mahogany, and that's preventing Mahogany from peeling off to go get Grenard. No matter, Goff escaped out of there, which was insane, first of all, and then gets the ball to Montgomery, and his play is just as good, right? He breaks the tackle in open field. For a moment, I thought he was gone. I didn't realize that there was, the Vikings have great pursuit. Those guys get after the football. This backside defensive tackle, 97, is there. Van Ginkel's pursuing Metellus. So, there's 6 guys on screen right now. They just do a great job of getting after the football. But that was a spectacular play from Montgomery. But look at everything that had to be done in order to make that happen. Wilson is threatening the blitz. Him and Cashman are not, however, going to blitz. They're both going to drop out. Van Ginkel on the other side, he's going to drop out from an outside linebacker position, but Grenard is going to stunt underneath. You kind of get a view here of what I'm talking about with the defensive tackle briefly holding Mahogany. We're talking about, it's not how you take on an offensive lineman, so it's pretty obvious what's going on, but maybe it just wasn't blatant enough for them to call it, but in any case, it's enough to not allow Mahogany to get to Grenard, who rips underneath quickly, gets to Goff, really probably easily could have been a sack. So give them credit for when they're not blitzing up the middle and putting pressure on the center, running back, and 2 guards. they're running some kind of stunt, and in this case, it worked perfectly for them. The only thing is that Montgomery makes a fantastic play out here in space to give the Lions a chance. Well, they go down and get their touchdown, really, their second touchdown here of the first half. Took a short field to do it, number one, and an amazing play that was much needed because they're completely struggling at this point. You had the opening touchdown and then punts on 5 of the next 6 possessions in the first half. I'm going to give you a couple of plays from this goal line situation. I really love the third down pass attempt to St. Brown. It's just, the timing's a little bit off there. Maybe St. Brown's route took slightly longer. Maybe Goff threw it too far in front. But I want to show this second and goal run play. Again, this is on the 4th possession, and just to illustrate how difficult it was to get things done. Kind of like this 6-1 lightning look for Minnesota, even though they do have 2 inside linebackers, so 6'2", whatever you want to call it. But these guys are just slamming down. So they're just all taking the inside gap or trying to. So I'm talking about OLB going inside that gap there underneath of Skipper. Van Ginkel, going underneath of Brock Wright's gap. So they're basically trying to spill it out to Metellus, who's the blitzer on the outside. It's just a great way to try to create disruption, and it worked. I mean, he got penetration in the backfield. The spot was very fortunate for the Lions, I think, in that it looked to me like he's back almost on the 3, but they spotted it a little bit better than that. Minnesota had a great bead on the run-pass stuff. They seem to be extremely prepared, in my opinion. Sometimes you got to tip your cap to the other team. Of course, we have a high standard for the Lions as well. We should. But Minnesota was absolutely prepared for so many of those things, those situational football moments. Very next snap, like I said, fortuitous spot. Perhaps target is going to be St. Brown up to the top. So he's basically running like up the field and then an out, very similar to some routes that we've seen him run down in the goal line before, except he's going to fake. It's a fade out and then up. I'm not exactly sure what people want to call it, but they have layers, Goff and St. Brown, to their end zone, red zone work. And he's taken Isaiah Rodgers up the field for a moment and then works to the outside and then brings it up the sideline. The margin for error here is small because of the sideline to deal with. and unfortunately for the Lions, it didn't work out here. Would have been a huge highlight for St. Brown and Goff. Probably difficult for you guys to see it from this far away. They ended up punching it in on the short touchdown run from Montgomery on the very next play to tie the game at 14. Like I said, it took 9 plays to travel 35 yards and get that accomplished. Moving forward here to the 5th possession, Minnesota has added on a field goal to take a 17-14 lead. Motion St. Brown across, and so you do get a DB. In this case, it's Murphy going with him. So Goff's got a pretty good idea, at least he thinks, that it's going to be man. The Vikings did a great job, in my opinion, of showing what looked like man because of situations like that, and then altering things post-snap. Of course, since I have the 2 outside linebackers spot shadowed, you can guess they're going to drop out while both inside linebackers are blitzing. It's a completed pass to St. Brown for like 8 or 9 yards underneath of what really looks like kind of an invert half Tampa 2. We're talking about Smith here, and I think that's a corner up to the top side dropping out while this safety is just going to sit down and look at Goff's eyes, but also orient himself to St. Brown. Why is he orienting himself to St. Brown? Because that's the first place that Goff is looking. So it's a unique coverage attempt, if you ask me, in that Murphy followed St. Brown across. So it looks like man, but it's not. It ends up becoming a hybrid Tampa 2. Goff still, quote, figured it out because it's a 4-man rush, essentially, and I will give the end zone angle so you can see that and confirm it for yourself. It's a high standard that Minnesota put on Goff and the offensive lineman's shoulders. So you can see the same dynamic over and over again. You really don't need me to explain it. 2 inside linebackers are going to blitz. Both OLBs, I think it's Turner and Grenard, on our left are going to drop out. And really, they're putting a lot of pressure on Gibbs. I think Cashman ends up being engaged by the center, and I believe this is the one where Wright will be held up by Gibbs. And I think he does a decent job on this one compared to some of the other plays. Yeah, stonewalls him a little bit. And you can see that the guy who dropped down basically in the middle third of a Tampa 2, which is obviously a misnomer and doesn't work out mathematically. He's just looking at Goff's eyes. Since Goff is looking over here to St. Brown, that guy who is a safety knows where to react. Quickly on top of St. Brown, and lo and behold, he's the guy who gets there to make first contact after the catch, limit St. Brown to an 8-yard gain. It certainly seemed like at times while watching the broadcast, like Minnesota had 12 players on the field on defense. And then watching the all-22 angle film today, it's confirmed for me. If you told me that there was 12 guys on defense, I would believe it. This next play is kind of an illustration of that. It's the very next snap after that completion to St. Brown. They're going to motion St. Brown all the way across. Laporta is going to kind of run underneath. And since they're not showing a blitz at this point in time, pre-snap, with their mug looks, that of course means they're going to bring everybody. It's a 7-man rush. You wouldn't expect that to necessarily work against a guy like Goff. You got to get rid of the ball quickly. To me, this is Flores and the defensive staff just turning up the volume, turning up the heat, and it's a great play by Harrison Smith. I would like to see some stuff a little bit further down the field, but you're not going to have time to do that. I've said this for years. When the Ravens saw stick splits 0 so much, we had a lot of trouble with it. And in fact, it was Brian Flores. It was Brian Flores in 2021. So as a fan, I've been through this, and so many Ravens fans have. We watched the same type of destruction with heavy blitzes happen to Lamar Jackson and the Ravens in 2021. Now, we had a terrible team that year. We had a terrible offensive line, even worse than our O-line this year. So it's not the same dynamic as your Detroit team. But what I'm saying is we've been here watching this occur, and what ended up really working for us against this heavy blitz stuff was a backside drag. A backside drag by the X, running underneath, because all 7 of those guys are blitzing, and they're creating this space between, well, really there's no second level of the defense. There's the first level, the blitzers. Let me get all this out of the way, sorry. There's the first level, the blitzers. And then there's the second level, the coverage guys. And so the idea is throwing something short, letting your guy run horizontally. In this case, they're trying to get it out to St. Brown in the flats. Let me give you the same play from the end zone angle, but you understand the idea. At this point in time, I would like to try to explain something to you. We used to identify blitzes from like quadrants. Where did people like to blitz? Some people like to blitz outside. You've seen enough of this game to obviously know that they're blitzing through the A-gaps a lot with the inside linebackers. In this case, there's 1 or 2 guys blitzing from every single quadrant. From each of those 4 shapes that I drew there for you, there's a guy who's emanating from that position. Harrison Smith, free rusher off the edge, elevating to go get the football and knock it down from Goff. Fortunately, it didn't end up in the air. It forces another punt as you're down 17-14. Terrion Arnold gets the football back with an amazing play for his first interception of the season, his first career interception, in fact. But the disappointment really didn't end. I was pretty frustrated at halftime. I'm sure you were with the offense as well. This is a 2nd and 10. And again, you've got this kind of differential release of the safeties, but now it's occurring a little bit earlier, and it's pre-motion. This is kind of the type of day that it was from a frustration standpoint. Raymond absolutely decks Van Ginkel on a screen. So he's motioning down. You're getting Van Ginkel out of there. I think this play was specific for Van Ginkel. He's so great against screens. So from a Lions perspective, it's mission accomplished. You did what you came to do here. It's a 2-high safety structure, dropping out in, what to me really looks like a zone, 2 deep, 5 under. You've put Van Ginkel on the ground, and then he's the guy that makes the tackle. Don't get me wrong, there's a defensive lineman, a defensive tackle who's responding to it as well. I don't think he's necessarily going to make the play on Gibbs. It looks like Sewell is locked up with him now. I'll give you the end zone angle of it. It's just so unfortunate and almost unbelievable at this point that they're playing so well on defense that a guy gets, KO'd, knocked down, and makes the tackle almost from his feet. He does actually have to get up. Raymond's a violent blocker. So great job of designing this, putting him on the ground, which I suspect it was specific to him, and then he makes the tackle. That had to be difficult for the coaches and players to see that. So if we're frustrated as fans watching it, imagine going through a whole week and having a specific screenplay designed to go against a certain guy, in this case Van Ginkel, who's great against screens. You do it, knock him on the ground, and then he still makes the tackle. Just, truly unbelievable if you ask me, the way that worked out. Finally, 3rd and 13. Lions are going to do the same motion with Gibbs, where he starts off on one side for Goff, in this case to the field, motions out, and they're looking for the reaction, probably from the nickel defender in Martellus. And then once Gibbs comes back, he ends up finishing up on the opposite side of Goff. So he started out up here, motion across, and then ends up back on the bottom side, the downside for us. And these two guys are obviously communicating something. It's Metellus and then Cashman. Keep in mind it's a 3rd and long. What you've just seen on the last possession was a heavy blitz. Harrison Smith was the free rusher off the edge. Same thing. I don't think these blitzes end up here, at least, being, we have the benefit of time to be able to examine them. That's the only way that I can understand them anywhere near to the level of the guys that actually do this stuff. We have the benefit of that. But now, looking at them now on the All-22, they don't appear as complicated as they did live. You have this version, this heavy 7-man blitz on 3rd down, 3rd and long. It was 3rd and 4, actually, on the previous possession. You have the 2-man inside linebacker blitz where the OLBs drop out in coverage. And then, kind of a standard 1-man inside linebacker blitz where Pace ended up soloed up against... where Pace ended up soloed up against Jahmyr Gibbs. It doesn't look like you have 7, 8, 9 different versions of blitzes here. It looks like you have 7, 8, 9 different versions of pre-snap movement, and really 2 or 3 or maybe 4 stunts that they've used in combination with inside linebacker blitzes to really give Detroit trouble. I'm a little surprised after watching the film today that this caused so much difficulty with the pass pro. I feel like the Lions are probably looking at the film today thinking, how did we let all of this happen so much from something that is a whittled down version of what Flores and his defense can do? I'm not sure if other people have summarized it or evaluated it in the same way. Certainly not discrediting or discounting what Minnesota did. They played a whale of a football game on defense, obviously holding the Lions to 65 yards rushing. Yeah, Goff got to 284 passing and 2 touchdowns, augmented, of course, by the 40-yard touchdown to Laporta on the first possession, and then a 37-yarder to Jamison Williams later on. Other than that, you had 35 passes for less than 200 yards, or right around 200 yards, So Minnesota deserves a ton of credit. What I'm saying is I suspect that Detroit's offensive line coaches and staff and their players are now looking at this and kind of saying, I can't wait to get another shot at them because I think we'll be able to handle this a little bit better. You're more than welcome to not share that same opinion as I do, but I'm just continually surprised that this looked more simple on film than it did live, and even trying to encapsulate for you guys in a reaction video last night. I thought there was this really wide umbrella of stunts and blitzes that they used, and at least in the first half, the film that I presented here to you guys now, that was not the case. In any case, appreciate you guys' time. If you enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comment section, number 1. Finally, if you think other Lions fans would at least enjoy to hear my thoughts and as well as observe some of the film that I chose to illustrate my points, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.